we never really had a protocol for value exchange on the internet. And, the fiat monetary system has basically just tried to be, kind of shoved into this internet system to try to make it work. But, it's been incredibly inefficient and, full of holes, massive security holes. And that's why the banks have their huge, compliance departments, because of all the issues that happen online trying to use the fiat monetary system. So the final puzzle piece for the internet is the money protocol. And that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the protocol for money. We live in a digital world where almost everything has been digitized: communication, music, photography, etc., except for money. We're still living on a fiat standard, and money is being digitized, and this is Bitcoin.
Lachie McWilliam is a Bitcoin maximalist who spent 20 years as a cybersecurity professional in banking of all places, securing financial systems at the likes of HSBC, Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyds, until he realized that the real revolution wasn't inside the banks, but it was actually outside the banks. Lachie discovered Bitcoin in 2012, lucky bugger, never looked back. Now as the founder of Edge 21, he's built in a space for maxis to stay informed, save time and avoid the crypto distractions, the shitcoins. He also found the Surf Coast Bitcoin Meetup, a growing community with over 100 Bitcoiners who meet monthly to discuss Bitcoin sovereignty and the future of money. Lachie, such a pleasure, mate. How are you today?
Yeah, awesome, Sean. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, real pleasure. I've really been looking forward to this. We got on a call, I think it must have been 2 weeks ago now. I saw one of your posts about Edge 21. Like, cool, we got to talk. We started talking about that, and then we started talking about Australian housing and the currency debasements and everything that's going on there. And, well, you've put in the proof of work, mate. Since then, you've sort of run with that concept and you've put together a whole presentation for the audience. So can you just give us a little bit of a teaser of what we're going to go through today? And we'll put a pin in that and we'll come back to it. I just want to touch on something just before we actually dive into the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, been in Bitcoin for many years, and I guess this is a bit of a presentation that I put together over time. It's a few different sort of topics, but ultimately it kind of, it's a sort of presentation that I could give, to my partner who, after all these years still doesn't really get Bitcoin, to my parents and that sort of thing. But just explaining the opportunity that is Bitcoin, and, and how if we sort of look back over the last 10 years, but also look back to history as to, where money's come from and what money is and what makes good money. When you have that understanding of Bitcoin, so when you have that understanding of money, then you can really appreciate what Bitcoin is. And then you look at, what's happened over the last 10 years and what could happen over the next 10 years. So it's kind of trying to, give that perspective on what could happen. The sort of the title of the presentation is the $53 trillion opportunity, which would kind of represent, a bit of a prediction for a market cap of Bitcoin in 10 years' time, which is kind of similar to some other predictions out there as well. But I kind of walk through, how that's possible. And then also touch on a bit of, there's a lot of shitcoinery going on out there. There are a lot of like Bitcoiners will notice. I try to stay out of it because when you argue with those guys, it just doesn't go anywhere. But sometimes,
well, they lack common sense, bros. So there's just zero reasoning.
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself ending some of these arguments with, "Yeah, you're doing great." Just leave it there. Yeah, exactly. It is absolutely common sense. So there's a bit of, a few slides in there talking about Bitcoin versus crypto and how different they really are.
Awesome. Well, we'll dive into that. But before, I think it would help the community dive into your experience. Like, you're a cybersecurity expert with the banks. Now, like most Bitcoiners are fed up with the banks. The amount of pain that I've had with the banks, like over the last 18 months, been blocked out of my account or locked out of my account, or not being able to use that bank ever again for simply just transferring money. I think you've got probably a unique perspective. Are they just trying to protect themselves? Because when you send money out, say to Bitcoin, there's no undo or whatever, and maybe they're fearing that they're liable, or do they just truly not want money to leave the system? Like, I'd be interested what your perspective is on that. And then also, like, what were you doing as a cybersecurity expert within the banks? What's that job look like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess I'll briefly just start with, kind of what I did there. So I've worked mostly in the risk department, so kind of technology risk. So it was all about just, looking at what potentially could go wrong and making sure, so looking at the risks of what could go wrong within the banking infrastructure, within the technology of the bank, which is, incredibly complex and full of old legacy crap and, massive risk everywhere. And then looking at, making sure we've got good controls in place, right, to make sure that things don't go wrong. So that was pretty much what I did over the past 20 years, working for various banks. So, I didn't get too much into like the compliance departments and all that. And these banks are massive, ugly beasts. Like, and it's just hard to understand. I mean, I used to wonder how these banks actually make any money, because there's just so much red tape, so much regulation, and it's within every single role within the bank. And I guess to your question about making it hard for Bitcoiners, I suspect there's some certain opinions on it coming from the top, right? Who knows where that comes from, and certain directions as to whether they should be allowing Bitcoin or not. But I would expect that a lot of it is probably what they would think is legitimate, because we know what Bitcoin is and how powerful it is, but the average person doesn't. And the average person working in a bank, in their compliance and regulatory departments, they just don't understand Bitcoin like we do, and they do see it as a scam. Like my parents' friends, when they ask me what I do and I mention the word Bitcoin, they instantly think, or quite often I'll get comments like, "Oh, I got scammed in that," and my next question is always like, "Yeah, but was it Bitcoin or was it something like Bitcoin Infinity or Bitcoin Gold or whatever Bitcoin name they come up with?" So yeah, so anyway, I just think it's just lack of knowledge, and then obviously all those scams out there. You get people probably contacting the bank saying, "Oh, I've been scammed with this Bitcoin thing," right? And that's probably what they're hearing.
Yeah, fair enough. What I find crazy is, obviously, like yourself, we've gone so far down the rabbit hole. So, not understanding Bitcoin, I find that really difficult to be able to take myself back to a time before. Like, I've put in thousands of hours over the last 5 years to understand that. And it's like the Bitcoin logo is the first thing that I see when I wake up. It's the first word that I see with my hat hanging on the banister and things like that. And then walk down to the studio and it's everywhere. And then with the news, the 500 live news shows and stuff that I've done, it's really hard. And then like on X, formerly Twitter, it doesn't make sense that people have other conversations aside from Bitcoin on X. Like, I just feel like it's a Bitcoin town hall. But you are quite right. Like, the world has not woken up to what Bitcoin is. So I'm hoping through this presentation, Lachie, we can share a bit of light on it. And if you're ready, do you want to just dive straight into it? You've got quite a lot of slides to get through.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. That'd be great. All right. So we live in the Bitcoin era, and I think it's clear to say that not everyone is aware of it yet, but times are changing very, very fast. And I see Bitcoin as a $53 trillion opportunity. So within 10 years, I would expect to see Bitcoin with a market cap of $53 trillion. And let me walk you through how I think we get there. So let's start with exponential growth. And exponential growth equals progress. And we get exponentials everywhere in life. And it's one of those ideas that's incredibly hard for us to understand. So it can seem like we're living in difficult times and that things are actually getting worse. But the reality is that in most areas, we're actually getting better and better. So here's just a few examples here where, child mortality rates going down, deaths from infections going down. And this is taking like a zoomed out view. Deaths from malnutrition down, global mortality rate down, labor force and agriculture down, extreme poverty rate going down. And then, of course, we've got some others going up. So literacy going up, life expectancy going up, and GDP per capita going up. And I mean, if you take a short-term view, some of these can obviously dip down and you can start feeling like you're living in, the worst of times. However, reality is that in most areas, we're getting better and better. So I think as Bitcoiners, we think more positively, right? And I know definitely for me. And so, positive thinkers get positive results. And there's a great quote: whether you think you can or you can't, you are right.
It's one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
Yeah. And so if you think Bitcoin is not going to work, then it's probably not going to work for you. And, ultimately you're going to get Bitcoin at the price you deserve, right? But if you understand Bitcoin and you think positively about the future, then, I mean, Bitcoin is inevitable and it's going to work for you. So revolutions. Human life has gotten better and better through a series of revolutions. And with each revolution, things have gotten better and cheaper. And of course, all revolutions face critics. And I'm just going to walk through some of the biggest revolutions and the impact that it's had. Of course, the printing press made knowledge cheaper. And then we had the steam engine, which made transportation cheaper. The Industrial Revolution made manufacturing cheaper. Telecoms made communication cheaper. And of course, computers made calculation cheaper. And then more recently, AI, which is, just growing at an exponential rate, has made intelligence and prediction cheaper. And finally, Bitcoin. What has that made cheaper? Trust. And trust is a massive thing in human life. And it's going to, reoccur through some of these slides. So I'm going to walk you through a few of those specifics.
Just quickly on that, Lachie, it's pretty interesting. Like when you said, what's Bitcoin made cheaper? My first thought was everything priced in Bitcoin over a long enough time frame is cheaper. But I like that, the trust.
Yeah. I think if you get down to the deep point, right? That's the most important point, is that it's ultimately it's trust that's going to be made cheaper and possible like we've never seen before. So that will be the revolution, I think. And if we look at tech adoption, that's been happening faster and faster. If you look at, TV, it kind of, had a bit of a slow start, and then it starts to rocket up. And then smartphones. I'm sure you're the same as me. I remember a time before smartphones.
The snake on the Nokia 3315s.
That's it. Absolutely remember that. And then all of a sudden, you've got billions of people with smartphones.
Just quickly on phones, just a throwback. Did you ever get those Coke phones? So you'd collect like 10 Coca-Cola wrappers, and then you'd go to like Coles or something, and you'd pay $50 and hand in the 10 wrappers, and you'd get a Coke phone?
I remember doing that with wrappers and things like Mars bars and whatever, but I don't remember the Coke phone.
Yeah. I wish I still had it. I don't drink Coca-Cola. Phone. Yeah. So it was like Coca-Cola branded. Who knows what happened? It probably still works wherever it is. Those phones, I've still seen like 3315s turn on. They don't make them like they used to.
Yeah, I know some people who still use the 3210, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, and it you know what, in many ways, it probably would be a good thing for some of us to go back to, right? 'Cause just to avoid doom scrolling on the phones. I
Amen
know
to
I'd
that.
actually, yeah, I'd prefer if our kids didn't have smartphones. To be honest, it's
Yeah.
always a battle with those smartphones, but anyway, now suddenly billions of people have smartphones, right? So, so we see this tech adoption. You know, often they sort of had this kind of like slow start, and then all of a sudden it just booms with adoption. And guess what? We're right at the beginning of the Bitcoin era, and you might just see Bitcoin down here in the chart. And over the next 10 years, I think that Bitcoin's going to be worth at least $2.5 million, and that would be part of the $53 trillion market cap. And I'm going to show you exactly how. But the key thing to keep in mind is that we are very, very early. And I think the reality is Bitcoin has really just started on this adoption curve. And once the ball really gets rolling, which, you know, for us it already has, and for many, you know, maybe 100 million other people it already has, but once it really starts rolling, it's just going to rocket.
Yeah.
And of course, adoption rates occur exponentially, right? So, and this is something that we find difficult to comprehend. And as a demonstration, do you know about the folding the paper 50 times? Have you heard that analogy before?
Yeah, it reaches the moon.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, it actually goes a bit further than that. So if you get a piece
Crazy.
of paper, yeah, and you fold it 50 times. Obviously, it's physically impossible to do that with a piece of paper. I think you can't get past like 4 folds. But if you
7, I
were,
think.
is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But of course, if you were able to do it 50 times, so you keep folding it, doubling itself, so it doubles every time. By about the 20th turn, you're up to about 1,000 meters. And then if we keep going, obviously we're heading into the exponential ranges here, and it literally starts going off the screen. So we're up to about 9,000 meters, and we're only at fold number 23. So anyway, it actually becomes over 1.1 billion kilometers thick. So the sun is like 150 million kilometers away. So actually, this piece of paper would extend well past Jupiter's orbit. So this is crazy, right? I remember telling someone recently about that, and they just can't comprehend it. And that's the point, right? This is the power of exponentials.
Yeah.
And going back to smartphones, it was a compounded pattern. You know, compound interest is the same thing, right, as exponentials. And Bitcoin is following exactly that. It's just very difficult for us to understand that. But if you do try to understand exponential patterns, you can create value for yourself in terms of making money, in terms of careers and businesses. That's where fortunes are made, especially in the tech world. All right. Just move on to the next slide. Einstein actually had a great quote. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And yeah, so he famously called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world because of how small gains build on themselves over time. And Bitcoin works in a similar way, not through traditional interest, but through exponential adoption. And the network effect of more people and institutions using Bitcoin compounds its value. And when you HODL, you benefit from this growth. So the longer you stay in, the greater the rewards.
Yeah. Yeah. Not about time in the markets, it's about time in the market.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I like this analogy with
Yeah.
Albert.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. That's right. Little did he know that it would relate to Bitcoin. So now let's just take a quick history lesson with ledgers and money. Probably many of your listeners, your audience will have an understanding of this, but this is a slightly different.
just on that really quickly, because for everyone watching, you just probably know a lot of this information. Please share this video with your mum, with your dad, with your sister, with your brother, your aunt, your uncle, the person at the cafe, the hot chick, whoever it is, somebody you want to change their life. We understand Bitcoin, we're buying, we're stacking, we're chilling. Please pass this on to somebody that's going to benefit, because the more people that hold Bitcoin, the better the world gets, the faster it gets better. Sorry, keep going.
No, absolutely. Fix the money, fix the world.
100%.
It's 100% true. Yeah. So, yeah, look, it's important to understand the history of ledgers and money and what they mean. You know, what is money and why do we have ledgers? And understanding what money is and needs to be gives you an appreciation of the power of Bitcoin and why it's the best money ever invented, or some people say discovered. So humans started living together about 13,000 years ago in modern day Israel and Jordan. And they started trading, of course. I think, you know, trading has been around for a long, long time, of course. Trading things like wool, wood, or wheat. And for that trading, where would they keep the records? And they would have been kept in the mind. And especially when you're operating in your small social circles within your village, then, you know, the trust that you need is kept in your mind. You remember who's bought what and who owes what. But if you want to trade with another village, you maybe didn't have the same level of trust, and maybe you had no trust. So that's where actually writing was invented. It was actually invented 5,000 years ago, not to communicate, but to maintain a record and to maintain a ledger of transactions. And then from here, about 2,500 years ago, gold coins were invented. And this was the thing that allowed you to trust someone far away, because gold was authentic and you could trust gold, and it was recognizable. And obviously gold has got some excellent qualities for money. Then after that, about 1,200 years ago, paper currency was invented, and paper currency was backed by gold or silver or a commodity. And of course, you would need to recognize this paper currency in order to accept it. So there was a few that were widely recognized and could be used in place of gold, for example. And then from here, you had the Medicis, who were an Italian family who invented banking. And what is banking? Well, banking is essentially just a ledger, and it keeps a record of who paid what and how much each customer has stored in the bank. You know, what's your bank balance, for example? And that's what modern day banking is. It's simply a ledger of transactions.
The only thing I'd just add on to that may be of interest is that was when double entry bookkeeping was invented. So that's what the Medicis invented, is a ledger at one bank, a ledger at the other bank, with double entry bookkeeping. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I'll mention that shortly, actually. But before I get there, this obviously you can see this is the $100 US dollar note, and this was backed by gold. There was had the gold stamp on it, which meant that this was redeemable for a certain amount of gold. But just over 50 years ago, in 1971, that stamp was removed. So the gold backing was removed, and the US and every currency in the world, about 160 currencies, moved to something called the Fiat standard. So currencies were no longer backed by gold, and they were just printed. And I believe this experiment is finishing. It has been an absolute catastrophe and has made everything more expensive. And I mean, in reality, when you zoom out, just over 50 years is just a blip in our monetary history. And so over the coming years, I think this experiment, this fiat standard experiment, is going to wind down and finish, and Bitcoin's going to take over. And I'll walk you through why I think that. And then just in summary, so we had there are various different ledgers. We started with our memory, then we moved to writing, then we moved to banking, and then ultimately Bitcoin. And as you mentioned before, with the double entry accounting, actually, I've heard many people refer to Bitcoin as triple entry accounting, right? Because we had the double entry, which was great, and that's how companies work now. But that means that each organization is maintaining their own ledger, whereas Bitcoin is now the third ledger because the blockchain is the third ledger because that's the trusted layer. So there's the trust, right? It's everyone agrees on that ledger and the current state.
Yeah.
And that's,
if it's written on the blockchain, that's the state of the world.
Yeah. And I think that's the fundamental way to think about Bitcoin is that it's a ledger, and actually it's a perfect ledger. It's one that's never been hacked, and it's the ultimate in trust.
Yeah.
So we look at ledgers, and then we looked at the coins. So we had, we started with coins, then paper notes, which were backed by commodities like gold. And then we moved to fiat currency only 54 years ago, and then Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is ledger 4.0 and money 4.0, the ultimate in trust. All right, moving on to some numbers and the exponential growth that is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin versus fiat currencies. Now, obviously, I'm just using this for a comparison because Bitcoin is not a fiat currency. It's completely the opposite. However, just to give people an understanding of how big it is now, we had the US dollar's worth about $5.82 trillion. And then you've got the euro, then you've got the Chinese yuan, and then the Japanese yen. And Bitcoin's currently worth, as of today, around about $1.93 trillion. So
that's so crazy. Like, look at the Aussie dollar there. It's so screwed, man.
Yeah. I know.
It's crazy.
Yeah. All of these fiat currencies are screwed, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Just slowly going up.
Yeah.
Up the chain.
And we see that with different rates of inflation all over the world. So we're considered lucky with our inflation, which is been pretty terrible for us over the last few years. But I can only imagine what it's like for other countries.
100%. It's sad. It's sick. It's a disgusting game, actually, that's being played at a global level.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the greatest theft of our lifetime. And remember, it's only a 54-year experiment at this point. It's just a blip in time, and we happen to live through it. So,
thanks, Satoshi, we have Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know. Actually, that's what I was talking to Michael Dunworth. He came to our Bitcoin meetup a couple of weeks back, and he said he said the same thing, and he's like, "What how would you feel if you didn't have Bitcoin?" And I'm like, I mean, yeah, if there was no Bitcoin now, I mean, if I'd never known about Bitcoin, then God, I would never have probably taken the time to understand this scam we're living through.
I wonder if we'd all be gold bugs or not. Like, as an analog version, gold's pretty good as a store of value. It's worked pretty well for 4,000 or 5,000 years. But I just wonder, like with our age, our generation, if we would have bothered, or we would have been like, nah, gold's old, bought into the mainstream media, where Bitcoin, its technology is exciting, it's new. I don't know, it's sort of hooked. At least it hooks me in, and there's so many things. We'll never know, nor do we need to, thankfully.
Yeah. No, I think you're quite right there. Potentially I could have got there one way or the other. But yeah, I'm so glad I've been able to, see what the reality is and had the veils of this corrupt financial system lifted. All right. Market capitalization. So let's look at Bitcoin compared to some of the largest companies out there. Bitcoin has just recently surpassed silver. So silver was $1.6 trillion. Bitcoin's now about 1.93 trillion, and it's hot on the heels of Amazon, Google, the Mag 7, Nvidia, and of course gold. Gold is almost almost worth $20 trillion in market cap. And at this pace, we will definitely overtake gold. And at that point, when that happens, I mean, that would mean a Bitcoin price of around $1 million per Bitcoin. So
yeah,
it's pretty huge.
Not financial advice, but my guess is probably within the next 5 years, we're going to see $1 million US Bitcoin price.
Yeah, absolutely possible. All right. And yeah, to back some of that up, we can actually look at some of the numbers here as well. So if we look at the Bitcoin price over the last 10 years, it's gone up on average of 84% every year. Right. So, and obviously, you know, as you and I both know, there's some big dips in there along the way and some brutal bear markets. But the reality is, you know, zoom out and look what's been happening.
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using Multisig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safe Dina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Dean, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safe Dina Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously G'day Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin Way. So reach out to the Bitcoin Way today. Can I just ask, Lachie, do you dive into maybe the mentality to keep when it dips or the bear markets in these slides coming up?
No, not really.
Do you mind if I just say a couple of words in regards to that?
Yeah, go for it.
With Bitcoin, like on average, it'll go up for about a year and come down for a year and then go sideways for about 2 years. And that's judging by history. History doesn't always repeat, but often it does rhyme. With those moments where it comes down, you've probably bought it at a much higher price. The best strategy for the most amount of people is what's called dollar cost averaging, just buying the same amount week in, week out. If you do that for like an entire 4-year period of Bitcoin cycle, you are going to smooth those out. But what Lochie and definitely myself have noticed, or I can't speak for Lochie, but I'm sure he'll agree with me, is anyone that truly understands Bitcoin gets more excited about the days, the weeks, the months when it's down instead of when it's going up, because it means for every dollar we can get more Satoshis or more Bitcoin for that dollar. So they're actually a blessing, but just don't approach Bitcoin with getting rich quick. It'll probably happen a lot quicker than what you think, but if you have a longer term time frame, the ups and downs shouldn't worry you, and they're always a blessing. They're always an opportunity to be able to stack, in my opinion. I don't know if you've got anything to add onto that, but I just that's my mission last year is just to be there and just realize, provide people maybe a little bit of hope or something, that the red days are for buying. There is something to be able to get excited about, not something to be fearful when everyone else is panicking. Like Warren Buffett says, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. Just grabbing that and run with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like I had a mate, I was playing volleyball last night and one of my mates there was like, this Bitcoin thing, should I get in? And like, the first thing I'll usually say is, okay, yeah, absolutely, you should. But remember, this is not a get rich quick scheme. All right. I said it may very well be. Okay. You may invest now and you may be very, very happy over the coming months. However, you're best off to see this as a long term investment. And, there's that maybe 5 year rule in Bitcoin. I think it's maybe 4 years and 3 months, that no matter what point in time you bought Bitcoin at, you would have been ahead, right? So you got to see this as at least a 5 year investment. And yeah, absolutely. If you see it that way, then these dips don't need to affect you, right? Because you've got your Bitcoin. And if you're still fiat mining, right, you're still earning fiat, then you can absolutely use those days to stack harder, to stack more.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's Bitcoin price increasing it. So and
actually, can you just go back I just noticed something on the chart, and I just want to point it out to everyone. So if you see the increments of the price going up, it's $10, then 100, then 1,000, then 10, then 100,000. It just registered from 10 to 100,000, like is $90,000. It only looks like a little jump, but it jumped up $90,000 in that time frame, which is absolutely crazy, from just after 2020 to from 10,000 to over 100,000. Absolutely wild.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because these charts we're looking at are log charts, right? And that with Bitcoin, it's kind of more helpful sometimes to look at a chart where the scale is skewed, because otherwise, if you're looking at a standard kind of linear chart, the price movements are just going off the page, and we don't have a screen big enough for that. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so and it makes it look like it gives you a better overall picture that, hey, yeah, the price is just generally increasing over time. But we are talking about exponential numbers.
Yeah. And just on that as well, sorry to keep cutting in, Lachie, that's absolutely fascinating. It's incredible. But I stopped looking at the price after I had a conversation with Chris, the host and founder of Bitcoin Alive, Australia's biggest Bitcoin-only conference. That podcast is coming out on Monday, so it'll already be out by the time you just watch this video. But he hasn't looked at the price for like 3, maybe 4 years or something. And I've talked to him a few times about it, and I was like, okay, I'm inspired. So I haven't looked at the price for about a week, and I can read from the sentiment that it's a bit bearish or something, but it has not affected me, my thoughts or anything, because I just don't know. I'm still buying Bitcoin, so I know that my Bitcoin stack's going up, but the day to day, it doesn't mean anything, and that's a pretty cool way. So anyone new to the space, buy a stack and then chill, just forget about it and just keep adding, because the daily moves can be pretty big, but at the end of the day, they're just noise or a waste of brain space, or at best entertainment to be able to talk and have a bit of fun over on X.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and one Bitcoin is always equal to one Bitcoin, right? And I think when you fully understand what Bitcoin is, and that is the safest place for your money long term, then yeah, absolutely, these short term price swings are just not a concern. And I think the price really for me is only interesting. Just from an informational point of view, it's like, okay, well, what's the global consciousness saying about Bitcoin at the moment? So I kind of find that fascinating, but yeah, I don't get too worried. And yeah, hey, if we've got some red days ahead, yeah, great, stack some more.
Yeah.
And potentially we do, right? But that's short-term thinking.
Yeah. I think the milestones, 100K was a massive milestone, say was 10K, the all-time high is 108,000. That'll be another milestone. On those days, I think it's worth paying attention to the price. And in general, I like jumping on X and having a bit of a banter about it, or just saying, hey, it's a red day, just buy and enjoy. But I think the message maybe from both of us is don't let the price affect your emotions. Just have a plan, stick to the plan, and just accumulate. Or not.
Yep.
It's not financial advice. Maybe just a good idea.
Yep. Long-term, family wealth, that's the way I see it.
Yep.
So, yeah. Yeah, and just briefly, like this, some people will have heard of this, but another interesting thing is that these power laws, which actually occur naturally in wealth distribution, and also for things like, say, internet connectivity, and it's basically saying that Bitcoin doesn't follow like a straight line or exponential trend. It actually instead grows along a kind of predictable curve that spans multiple orders of magnitude. And it gets a bit technical, but what's fascinating is that Bitcoin has been following this power law. And there's lots of prediction models out there, but I do find this one quite interesting. And again, it's not guaranteed, but this particular model actually also has a similar prediction over the coming years, as to what I'm saying as well. So
with,
interesting.
with the with the power law, Lachie, like
Mm.
I've had Giovanni on the show before once, and we've communicated next and stuff. And that aside, the power law, there's a really good book, I believe it's called Scale, that dives into like what power laws are and stuff. You may know the figure more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at a model like this and, you've got these different sort of boundary lines and things, but there's massive gaps there, right? So and look, I'll openly admit that I've probably tried to trade Bitcoin, a handful of times over the years, and probably, you know, 9 out of those 10 times that I've tried, I failed, right? Because yeah, and yeah, it's just you're up against the hive mind of the world, and trying to get that right. I mean, ultimately, stay humble and stack sats, right? I mean, I think that is a brilliant phrase, and saves you a lot of emotional pain as well that trading actually brings. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. I guess ultimately, these days I'm putting all my energy really into this Bitcoin, and also and stacking as much Bitcoin as I can for my family, and so right now I guess I'm just trading my time for Bitcoin, and for helping others to do the same. So all right, and then of course, look, as you're going to expect, all of these charts are pretty positive for Bitcoin, and this is just looking at a lot of the stats, and they're all pointing up, right? I mean, that's just how it is with Bitcoin. Number of Bitcoin wallets going up over time, 29% year on year over the last 10 years. Now, obviously, people can have multiple Bitcoin wallets, but that is the number of wallets in general. Bitcoin users. This is a key statistic. Now, I don't know the full details on how this is all calculated, and I know it's probably quite an art, and not exact, because obviously Bitcoin is pseudonymous. So we can see these addresses out there, but we don't know exactly how many users there are. But we can make some pretty good. Uh, we can get a pretty good idea of it. And so, based on some of the data out there, it's suggesting we've got 29% growth rate year on year over the last 10 years. So, what happens when you've got an adoption that's growing fast and a supply that's decreasing, right? It's like basic supply and demand. Um, Bitcoin's becoming more scarce and there are more and more people using it every single year. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. True. Very true. Yeah, it's great to sort of just to see what's going on, and because it's again, it's so easy to get lost in the noise, and it depends on what you tune into as well, right? If you're tuned into mainstream media, you're not going to learn any of this. But this is all happening. Bitcoin is like this living organism that is just growing and cannot be stopped. Um, it cannot be turned off, right? And these stats, they just keep growing and growing. So the number of nodes, the nodes obviously create the decentralization of Bitcoin. Those are also increasing year on year. So over the past 8 years, they've been increasing at a rate of 17%. Um, I run a few myself that just tick up. Yep. Yep. 100%. Yeah. Yep. Yep. I've used different things. Raspberry Pi. I've been getting old laptops actually and building them on those. Um, Yeah, a couple of old, like, Lenovo's and stuff like that, just, pump them up with a bit of RAM and, maybe extra hard drive, and yeah, that Umbrel's pretty good, and then what else? What's the other one I use? Start OS as well. Yeah, um, little kind of they're more. Yeah, yeah, and the more you get into it, the deeper you dive down the rabbit hole. Well, let's just say you won't be turning around once you get down that rabbit hole. You'll just keep wanting to understand more, keep seeking the truth, and what is money, what is trust, and this slide here is also a testament to you know how many people out there that think the same way, right? The amount of energy that's going into securing Bitcoin through the proof of work algorithm, and that's been increasing as well. I mean, that looks like an exponential curve itself, um, reaching numbers just that, yeah, I would not have expected a few years ago. Um, so, I mean, it's up. I mean, it's up to about 19.4 gigawatts in terms of power consumption, um, which is around about 20 nuclear power plants. So pretty amazing. Mm, yep, yep. And that's how Bitcoin is distributed. It's an open opportunity for anyone to mine the Bitcoin. It is, can be expensive to do it, of course, but you know, it's that's Bitcoin's supply issuance model, and it's the most fair way possible. Yeah, I could share it. I could probably share it separately. Um, yeah, we might look to have a resources section. Yeah, Yeah, cool. Thanks. All right, let's keep going. Hodlers, diamond hands. So these these guys are also increasing. So this graph here actually shows long-term holders of Bitcoin, and long-term holders are, or LTHs, uh, they're defined as people who have not moved their coins for a period of 155 days. So they would be considered a long-term holder or hodler, and that's been increasing as well, year on year, 4%. So more and more, yeah. I mean, holding your Bitcoin for the long term is the key, and that keeps growing. Transactions also increasing. So that has been going up at a rate of last 10 years, yeah, about 14% over the last 10 years, and continues to grow. And of course, we also have different layers in Bitcoin as well, which are like Lightning, for example, which will also continue to increase. Quick look at ETFs, so the exchange traded funds, and I thought it's quite interesting just to look at the BlackRock ETFs. So because BlackRock has had the gold ETF for many years, and that's called IAU, and then you've got the new Bitcoin ETF called IBIT. So these are both BlackRock ETFs, and so Bitcoin actually, well, it took gold 20 years to reach $35 billion in assets. Okay, gold's currently about $35 billion in assets. And Bitcoin did this in under a year. And so Bitcoin is this sharp, almost vertical curve, sorry, vertical line on the chart. So the Bitcoin ETF actually smashed past gold on November 7th, 2024. And it's just unprecedented. And is, yeah, continuing to rise. And we've never seen, yeah. And that alone just says it all, right? Yeah. Um, yeah, yeah, yep. They were only launched, what, was it January last year, I think? Yeah. Um, right. And what's been the fastest to $1 trillion? So we had Microsoft took 44 years to get to 1 trillion. Apple took 42 years. Amazon took 24 years. Google took 21, and Bitcoin took 12 years. So again, yeah, moving very, very fast. And again, that's Bitcoin without a CEO or board or paid employees like all these other companies. Right? Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, just this, yeah, strange organic beast that is Bitcoin that is just continuing to grow and pick up the pace. Interesting too. No, just going to say, yeah, yeah. Have you heard of? There's a lot of like threes, sixes, and nines in Bitcoin. Have you read much about that? Mm. Yeah, yeah. I haven't got all the cool stuff on that, to be honest, right in front of me. But it's like, I mean, obviously, we're talking 21 million, right? So two plus one is three, and then there's lots of different stats to do with the halvings and the number of blocks in a halving, etc. And they all ultimately, like, if you look at these numbers, they start working out to 3, 6, or 9. And I just noticed that when I was creating this slide, is like, oh, okay, Bitcoin got to $1 trillion in 12 years. Oh, okay, well, there it is again. um, and it just starts popping up everywhere, like almost too many times. So, but yeah, Yeah, I actually heard it recently, and I'll dig it out after this as well, and I'll shoot it over to you. There's a good article about it too. So, yeah, I'm definitely fascinated with that as well. I think that it just says that Bitcoin is in harmony with the universe, right? I think, and that's I think what Tesla was getting on about as well. And when you look at the circumference of the Earth and the measurements of the pyramids, and they all adhere to those numbers. So pretty cool numbers. Um, yeah, you might have seen a chart like this. Might be a little small to see, but essentially, Bitcoin is the best performing asset of all time. And since 2011, Bitcoin has outperformed every other asset by a massive margin. And the cumulative return for Bitcoin from 2011 to 2024 is over 21 million percent. There you go, 21, right? Um, the annualized return, so year on year, is basically pretty much 150%. And if you compare that to traditional investments like the Nasdaq 100 is one of the top ones, that had a cumulative return of 896%, which is nowhere near the 21 million percent of Bitcoin. And then gold only has a return of 54.8% cumulatively. So, I mean, yeah, you can go through the chart. And obviously, as we know, Bitcoin did have some major drawdowns in 2014, 2018, 2022, almost as expected, because those are to do with the Bitcoin halvings. Yet, even with those massive drawdowns of, almost 70, 80%, it continues to outpace every asset over the long run. So the trend clearly shows that Bitcoin rewards long-term holders despite short-term price swings. Yeah. Yeah. Become a hodler. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll admit, I mean, hodling is definitely not easy, but the deeper you go down the rabbit hole and the more you understand, the more hours you put into it, um, yeah, the easier hodling becomes. Yeah, Bitcoin versus crypto. So, I mean, honestly, that there's just no comparison. But I think it helps to look at it from a couple of different angles. So, if we look at it if we look at protocols, what are protocols? And there are several key protocols that form the foundation of the internet. So, I'll just quickly skip through a few. We've got like uh, your web browser is actually powered by something called HTTP, and then internet-based calls were powered by VoIP or VoIP, Voice over the Internet Protocol. Emails, which we still use, every day, is called something called SMTP. Um, and then, of course, there's the security layer, which is called SSL, and the DNS, domain name system, which actually translates all our .com addresses, .com.au addresses into IP addresses, or the other way around. And then you've got FTP, which is for file transfers. And then, of course, you've got TCP and IP, TCP, IP. Those two together, commonly put together, forms the foundation of the internet. So, data exchange and routing. And of course, you've got this final puzzle piece here in the protocol mix of the internet. We never really had a protocol for value exchange on the internet, and the fiat monetary system has basically just tried to be kind of shoved into this internet system to try to make it work, but it's been incredibly inefficient and full of holes, massive security holes, and that's why the banks have their huge compliance departments, because of all the issues that happen online trying to use the fiat monetary system. So the final puzzle piece for the internet is the money protocol, and that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the protocol for money. It's the protocol for value exchange, and that's the way to think about Bitcoin. Like it's not just a technology. It's not a software project. Bitcoin is software, but that's just a tiny part of it, right? It's a protocol for value exchange, just like other foundational internet protocols. And so I think that's a key misconception that, Bitcoin is just another piece of software or passing technology that's going to be replaced. There's going to be a better Bitcoin, which, so many of the shitcoin projects like to tell you. And unfortunately, so many people get sucked in by. And I completely understand, because I was once sucked in too years ago, thinking that Ethereum sounded great, world computer, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it, and actually, there's a couple more slides ahead of this, which we'll get into a little bit. But yeah, you got to look at Bitcoin as the protocol, right? It's the invention of digital scarcity. Before Bitcoin, we weren't able to create a scarce asset on the internet. The internet, as most people know, you can send a photo, and that photo can go to 1,000 people, and you wouldn't know which one's the original. It just, things can be copied. But Bitcoin is the invention of digital scarcity. And once that's been created, you can't recreate it. It's a one time breakthrough, right? And so any other crypto project that is trying to sell you as we're going to be faster and better than Bitcoin, we're going to be the ultimate in payments. It's like they can try to do that. And, sure, on the surface, it might seem like they're going to be faster for some reason or whatever, but they they can't. Bitcoin has a network effect that it can't be beaten now. Like it's the protocol. And when you look at compare it to other protocols like the email protocol or other internet protocols. I mean, there were other protocols before TCP/IP, uh, and but TCP/IP is here to stay, and SMTP for email has been here to stay as well. And once something becomes a protocol, it becomes like infrastructure. And so you don't try to upgrade or replace infrastructure, you build on it, right? And so, yeah. So Bitcoin's not just a passing trend. Okay, what is Web3? So we hear a lot about Web3, and it's been kind of co-opted by a lot of the crypto projects out there. But in reality, we take a look back. We started with Web 1. Web 1 was about reading, right? So it was the early internet. It was like static websites that you couldn't really interact. It was just, like news websites and blogs and things like that. And then we went to Web 2, which was read, but also write. So you could actually interact. And this is things like Facebook and YouTube and Uber. And it allowed you to, share and interact with the internet and with other people. But the platforms themselves owned the data. So it was, centralized control, like big tech, centralized control. And then with Bitcoin was the start really of Web3, where through cryptography, so like public private key cryptography, we could read, we could write, but we could also own the data. So there are no intermediaries. It was direct peer-to-peer interactions, and I think a great, Bitcoin is that, right? You can own your value. You own your keys. You own your Bitcoin. That can't be taken away from you, and that's what Web3 is. And another great example is is the Nostr, which is the decentralized communications, really. Or I mean, at the moment, it looks quite a bit like X or Twitter, but you own your own keys, and everything you publish on Nostr is you own. And you can also verify that people can verify that you actually wrote a particular post on Nostr, for example. So Bitcoin is the monetary layer of Web3, and it's decentralized and censorship resistant, and ensures financial sovereignty in the digital era. So, and then if we also come at this from another angle, another useful analogy is to understand the difference between products and protocols, right? So if we look at products, we're all familiar with different browsers like Chrome and Safari, and then you've got mobile operating systems like Apple and Android, and then you've got different search options, Google, Bing, and now we've got AI, of course. And this is a good example of, like Google may not be the king of search for much longer, right? Especially with the launch, you've got some big competition hot in their heels. So these are products, and products can be, they're temporary and they're driven by competition and innovation. And then when you compare that to the protocols, and this is what all the products are built on, right? So protocols, we've got language, what we all speak, English, Spanish, Mandarin. We've got our number systems, universal systems that we use now, like 0, 1, 2, 3. Communication, TCP/IP, that powers the internet, as I mentioned before. And then, of course, you've got money. And Bitcoin is the protocol for digital money. That can't be superseded. And then you've got crypto. And so this is, a way to look at it. Like you've got these crypto projects essentially are products, and they can be replaced. So Bitcoin is not a product like crypto. It's a protocol. Yeah. Yeah. And protocols don't get replaced. They endure. And all of this product stuff ultimately gets built on the protocols. So, and yeah, cryptos, there are thousands of them. I don't know. I heard there was hundreds of thousands now. I don't know how many, but they just keep expanding. Oh, yeah, yeah. Fartcoin, like seriously. It's a meme world, right? So, um, and of course, in terms of the protocol space, Bitcoin has had competition. I mean, no one's ever come anywhere close, but there has been other crypto projects who have tried to compete with Bitcoin. But the reality is Bitcoin has won, and yeah, for so many reasons, Bitcoin can't be replaced, and these other projects will ultimately fail. But you've got these crypto products, so if you're wanting to invest in crypto, as you said before, Sean, like it's gambling, and you're investing in products that may or may not last. And you've got, there's lots of different crypto projects, stable coins, shit coins, NFTs. You've got meme coins now, security coins, utility coins, CBDCs, absolutely in the crypto category. Governance, it goes on, right? And look, most of them are scam or shit coins. You've got a whole bunch of them that are just bad technology projects. And then look, maybe there's going to be a small sliver that are going to be successful tech projects, but that's what they are. They're tech projects. And, some of those tech projects are stable coins. And look, I think in the short to medium term, stable coins definitely have potential, especially the US dollar stable coins. Stablecoins have been increasing at a rate of 35% over the last few years. And I definitely see, I mean, if you look at kind of the global consciousness, they don't really get Bitcoin, but I think most people understand what the US dollar is, from what I understand, right? Most countries I've been to, I've been to a lot of African countries, and they all get the US dollar, and that is what is recognizable. And I think, with that recent news of USDT being built on Lightning, for example, personally, I use the Aqua wallet, which has USDT on top of liquid Bitcoin. Yeah, which I think is really cool. I think there's absolutely a future for US dollar stablecoins, probably to go quite global. But I think ultimately, probably what's going to happen is that people will start to notice the inflation in the US dollar, and the obviously Bitcoin appreciating in value compared to that. Yeah, 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 and I think as these fiat currencies do continue to inflate and hyperinflate, they ultimately become like hot potatoes, right? You don't want to hold on to it for too long. So I would see the US dollar going down that route at some point, where people, instead of receiving the US dollar stable coin, they might be like, no, just give me the Bitcoin. You know, uh, so I could definitely see that happening. But for now, I think stable coins have uh, a future, and built on top of Bitcoin, because that obviously makes the most sense, right? You want to build on the most trusted monetary layer. Oh yeah, got to see that. Oh yeah. Um, I can just skip ahead, by the way. Um, so let's see. Um, yeah, so stablecoins versus PayPal and Visa, growth comparison. Actually, stablecoins have been growing at a massive rate, at an exponential rate. And yeah, interesting. Most interesting about this is that the Visa volume is about $11.6 trillion, and stablecoin volume is at 10.8. So, I mean, stablecoins are very close to Visa. So, um, all right, I'm going to jump to the prediction now. This is the final section, the $53 trillion opportunity. So, I reckon in 10 years, Bitcoin will be worth over $53 trillion market cap. So that's about $2.5 million per Bitcoin. And I'll explain how. So if you add up all the assets in the world, you get almost 1 quadrillion. That's, it's $992 trillion. And if you break this down, you got real estate about 430 trillion. You got bonds at 149 trillion, money at 138 trillion dollars, equities at 123, oil at 122, gold at around 19 trillion, metals at 7, and art and collectibles at 2 trillion, and in Bitcoin at 2 trillion also. Now you can take the glass half empty view on this and say, well, that's pretty small. But the glass half full is that 10 years ago, Bitcoin was only worth around $200 with a market cap of 130 million. So over the last 10 years, Bitcoin's actually had a 15,000x increase. So where will it be in another 10 years? And as Andreessen often says, that software is eating the world. I think Bitcoin is going to monetize much of this global capital as the superior store of value. I think we're going to see more and more Bitcoin taking shares of these other pools of global capital. So Bitcoin is eating global capital. And we live in a digital world where almost everything has been digitized: communication, music, photography, etc., except for money. We're still living on a fiat standard. And money is being digitized, and this is Bitcoin. And currently, Bitcoin is only worth 0.21%. There you go. There's 21, another 21, 0.21% of the total global capital. So if we just take a look over the next 10 years, that 0.21%, it could easily go up 5, 10% and beyond. Like, we don't really know, right? But over the last 10 years, Bitcoin has had a compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, as people say, of 84%. So year on year, it's been growing at 84%. So let's be conservative and say for the next 10 years, Bitcoin only grows at a rate of 30%, which is kind of similar, I think, to Saylor's prediction as well. But if we say that, then that would suggest that Bitcoin could become 3% of global capital. So that 0.21% could increase to 3%. And we could also look at the global capital increasing as well. So that could increase from, say, currently 992 trillion. Let's say the global capital increases by about 6% over the next 10 years. That would take it up to 1,777 trillion. So we're getting closer to that 2 quadrillion. So that 3%, if Bitcoin was 3% of that global cap, then therefore it would be $53 trillion market cap and $2.5 million per Bitcoin. And it's only a 25x from here. And that's in the next 10 years. Yep. And that's the end of the slides, mate.
Man, that's absolutely incredible. I hope we can find a way to be able to get that up. Obviously, there's a couple of slides there that got skipped over. Got a couple of minutes left. You've got a website, Edge 21. You're doing something pretty interesting, removing all the noise. It looks like that's just your focus, is just to remove the noise out of your life. You referred to Bitcoin as like it brought trust. I believe Bitcoin's the truth chain, the time chain. It's just, could not agree more. But I guess, like, what was the point of Edge 21? What is Edge 21, and where can people go, because they definitely want to go there?
Yeah,
they just don't know it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look, Edge 21, it's basically Bitcoin intelligence for Bitcoin maxis, right? That's who we're targeting, Bitcoin maxis, who we're supporting, I guess. And I mean, in a world drowning in noise, Edge 21 is basically your guide down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, giving you the edge you need. And there's just so much content out there, but your time, that's scarce, right? Bitcoin is scarce, but and also your time. And Edge 21 essentially curates like the best Bitcoin articles, tweets, Noston notes, videos, and charts, all in one personalized feed. So you've got like no distractions, just pure Bitcoin signal. And we even summarize the best podcasts and videos, including yours, Sean. And
Appreciate
it. It's gold. So people can get the key insights fast if they don't have time to sort of watch the whole thing. And then another really cool feature is we're doing these price alerts, which not only show you the percentage change, but they explain why Bitcoin moved. And that gets updated several times a day. And because I think understanding the why can help you make better decisions, right? If you're wanting to, make certain moves. And we're just getting started. So we're also adding charts, like the key charts that matter the most, such as like on-chain data, technical analysis, network activity, macro trends, and more. So yeah, so if you want signal, not noise, Edge 21 is for you. It's Bitcoin only, no crypto, no shit coins, no noise.
No, I absolutely love it. And after our conversation, I jumped on there and spent a while just browsing through. It was really, really incredible. And, when I was doing the news last year, every day I'd spend 4 to 6 hours a day on X searching for the news. What was the latest thing? And that was great. It was an incredible time in my life. However, while I was looking for the signal, the majority of my time was just trying to remove all the noise and just really zero in, and it took so much time. So you've done exactly that, but refined it even more. I think it's really cool and a benefit. So we'll put all those links below. I'll put your links below as well. We'll try and get this PowerPoint up on that Edge 21 as well. But Lachie, it's been a pleasure. Next time we jump on, we'll just leave a little bit more time either side and have a bit more of a rip. But I look forward to the next time. And if you can just let everyone know how they can get in contact, or if they want to go to your Bitcoin meetup, if they're in Victoria, I think that'd help them out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably easiest if you go to my X or Twitter, it's Lochie Freedom, and you can get all the links from there. But yeah, if you're down near Geelong in Torquay, come visit a Bitcoin meetup. Surf Coast Bitcoin, it's called, and we have probably over 100 members now, and we meet once a month. And but yeah. No, Sean, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on, and keep up with what you're doing, because I love all your content and everything you're doing. It's awesome.
I truly appreciate it. Absolutely love this rip, mate. And just for everyone out there, stack sats and chill, but please just do something nice for yourself today. There's somebody else out there. Have a beautiful day. Be blessed. Peace.